24/7, often pedaling away on her bicycle in the middle of the night to attend an emergency at the institute. With humble beginnings as a 12-bed cottage hospital, the Cancer Institute has now grown to become a nationally recognized cancer center with over 500 beds, a globally recognized research division, preventive oncology, a College of Oncological Sciences, and state-of-the-art treatment facilities. The Institute's golden rule is service to all, irrespective of social,
அவங்கள கொஞ்சம் இருக்க சொல்லுங்கக்கா. தம்பி 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 நெல்லு தம்பி.
has just begun. Every year, over 7 lakh people get affected by cancer. To reach out to them, the Institute has to spread its wings across the country. The Institute needs all the support it can get in this journey of compassion and care for the cancer affected.
The Adyar Cancer Institute and the Cancer Hospital today are serving as the flagship of the movement to provide hope for cancer patients. It has been in the forefront of promoting cancer literacy and also the fact that cancer is curable. More preventive than curative measures should be taken. I strongly plead for more support for this great institution.
It's a miracle what is happening in the Adyar Cancer Institute. This institution is one of the iconic institutions which really deserves all the support that the government can give, because it is a bright spot in the health map of the world.
I would like to congratulate Dr. Shanta and the Cancer Institute for the outstanding work that they have been doing over the years, and wish them well so that they can bring high quality cancer care to millions more.
The functioning of the Adyar Cancer Institute, the philosophy behind it, and the effectiveness that it has achieved in on-ground work in saving lives every day is something that needs to be recognized as a model that has been tried and tested. This is a model that is very worthy and that is desperately needed to be replicated throughout the country, as there are many countless pockets of urgent and very critical need existing.
The concept of a comprehensive cancer center was born in the mind of Dr. Muthulakshmi way back in 1926 in the corridors of the Royal Marsden Hospital, London. The consummation of a dream was the founding of the Cancer Institute, Madras, in 1952. There has been a sea change in the cancer scenario, a change in the concept and cure of cancer. Today, the slogan is "Cancer is curable, cancer is preventable." This is reflected in the long-term survival of all patients treated. Today, cancers that were considered fatal and incurable have come within the scope of curability. Pediatric acute lymphoblastic leukemias, where the cure was a dismal less than 20% before 1980, is today near on 60%. Testicular tumors and Hodgkin's disease have come within the scope of curability. Hodgkin's disease from less than 50% to almost 65 to 70%. Now, what about advanced cervical cancers from 40% to over 60%? Locally advanced breast cancers from 40% to 68%, and limb salvage in osteosarcomas. All this has been possible as a result of technological advances and conceptual changes. Ours is a mission of service. We need financial support and committed and dedicated personnel so that the benefits of medical research and advances can reach everyone, irrespective of social or economic class. Towards this mission, your support in any form, either service, expertise, or financial, will make all the difference to enable us to reach our dream, to bring a smile on the face of suffering, to cure wherever possible, to relieve always. 50 years ago, it was a dream, but today it is a vision of hope.
The journey continues.
is not a task to bear, but a gift, joy beyond compare. Dr.S. Krishnamurthi has quoted that in whatever we serve humanity, we do God's work. A good evening to all the distinguished guests and everyone joining us today. On behalf of the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University and the Cancer Institute, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. I humbly invite all our distinguished guests to join us on the dais. I invite the orator, Professor Hermann Heinrich Ottensmeier, Dr. K. Narayanasamy, Dr. K. Sivasangita, Dr. Vijayanand Pandurangan, Dr. D. Balanaganandini, and Dr. Kalpana Balakrishnan to join us on the dais. With a contented heart and striving to reach the set goals mind, we are gathered here to pay our respect to our advisor, whose life and contributions continue to inspire us. Today, we are assembled not only to remember our advisor with affection and gratitude, but also to celebrate the values and vision he embodied. This memorial oration is a tribute to Dr. Krishnamurthi's enduring legacy. I would say, with no further ado, we shall begin the program with Tamil Thai Vazhthu. I request all to kindly rise for the same. Now we have the signature song of Cancer Institute. I request everyone to kindly remain seated. The flame of the lamp signifies knowledge, purity, wisdom, and divinity. It also reminds us to continuously strive towards a brighter and better future. To begin this program on an enlightened note, we shall now proceed with the traditional lighting of the lamp. I would like to invite our esteemed guests on the stage to do the honors. Thank you. I now humbly invite Dr. K. Sivasangita, the Registrar of the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, to welcome the gathering with an official address.
Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure and deep sense of privilege to welcome you all to this prestigious occasion, Dr.S. Krishnamurthi Memorial Oration, a tribute to the visionary, a healer, a pioneer in the field of oncology, whose legacy continues to inspire generations. We are truly honored today to have with us Professor Hermann Heinrich Ottensmeier, Director Clinical Research, the Clutterbridge Cancer Center, Professor of Immuno-Oncology, University of Liverpool, UK. Welcome, sir. Sir is internationally acclaimed oncologist and academician whose work in cancer immunotherapy had a transformative impact on clinical oncology. We are privileged to have you here today with us, sir. Thank you. I am extremely delighted to welcome our esteemed Vice Chancellor, sir, for this oration. Your presence here underscores the importance of academic excellence and collaboration in advancing healthcare and medical research. Welcome, sir. I extend my warm welcome to Dr. Vijayanand Pandurangan, Professor, Division of Vaccine Discovery, La Jolla Institute of Allergy and Immunology, California, USA. Welcome, sir. I extend my warm welcome to Dr. Kalpana Balakrishnan, CEO and Medical Director of Cancer Institute. Welcome, ma'am. I wholeheartedly welcome all the faculties, researchers, staff, and students of Adyar Cancer Institute. Once again, I welcome you all for being part of this memorable occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I now invite Dr. Kalpana Balakrishnan, CEO and Medical Director of the Cancer Institute, to introduce the oration.
Good afternoon. Respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. MGR Medical University, Dr. K. Narayana Swamy, governing body members of Cancer Institute, Professor Ottensmeier, our orator of the evening, invited dignitaries, esteemed colleagues, guests, and members of the Cancer Institute family. It's indeed my honor and privilege to welcome you all to the Dr.S. Krishnamurthi Oration 2025, an event that commemorates the vision, the values, the lifelong contribution of one of the most revered figures in Indian oncology, Dr. S. Krishnamurthi. Affectionately known to all of us at Cancer Institute as the advisor, Dr. Krishnamurthi was not only a pioneering oncologist, but also a beacon of ethics, compassion, and purpose-driven leadership. Alongside his illustrious mother, Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy, she was India's first woman medical graduate and a fearless social reformer. He laid the foundation of what has grown to be one of the nation's leading cancer centers in India. Born in 1919, his life was one of service, courage, and conviction. Even as a young medical student, his spirit of resistance shone through, refusing to wear a tie in protest against the British rule during his final MBBS examination. He was briefly imprisoned, but that did not compromise his excellence in his academic ability. After advanced oncology training in the US and the UK, Dr. Krishnamurthi returned to India, giving up a promising career abroad to build something far more meaningful, a comprehensive cancer center for a country that had virtually no care centers. In 1959, he assumed leadership of the Adaya Cancer Institute, working tirelessly alongside Dr. Shanta, often as the only two doctors working day and night. Dr. Krishnamurthi's contributions were transformative. He pioneered multimodal cancer treatment in India for the first time. He championed early detection and screening. He established oncology as a super specialty for the first time in the country. His guiding belief, today's research is tomorrow's treatment, remains the cornerstone of our everyday work today. For his service, he was awarded the Padma Shri in 1970. He's contributed to several national and WHO committees and has been a member and made a lot of contributions. But his truest legacy lies in his values he lived by: humility, integrity, and the conviction that medicine must always serve humanity. He once said, "An organization can grow and strengthen only if the principles that direct its policy is the well-being of the large community that lives around it." This oration, instituted in 2010 in his memory, is not merely an academic event. It's a reaffirmation of these ideals. It's a tribute to a man whose life was, in every sense, dedicated to healing, teaching, and service. As we begin this year's oration, let us remember Dr. Krishnamurthi, not only for all that he achieved, but for all that he stood for. And may his legacy continue to guide and inspire generations to come in helping the well-being of the large global community that lives around us. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I now invite Dr. Vijayanand Pandurangan, Professor, Division of Vaccine Discovery, Larjola Institute of Allergy and Immunology, California, and the Director, Research of Cancer Institute, to introduce the orator of the day.
Greetings and thank you all for coming. It's a great pleasure to introduce Christian Ottensmeier, who is Professor of Immuno-Oncology at the University of Liverpool. He is also the Director of Clinical Research at the Clatterbridge Cancer Center in Liverpool. Now, Christian completed a medical degree in 1986 and then took an unusual path for about 15 years, training parallelly in medical oncology and rigorous research training. He spent about 7 to 8 years training in hematology oncology in Germany and in Southampton University in the medical oncology divisions, and got certified as a medical oncologist with the Royal College of Physicians. In parallel, he had an integrated program where he spent 3 years in Dana-Farber Cancer Institute training in tumor immunology in the early 90s. Then he also went on to do a dedicated PhD, a 3 to 4 year program, completely basic science research with Frida Stevenson, an expert in B-cell biology, and he was working on DNA-based vaccines for lymphoma in the late 90s. Once he finished his clinical and research training, he started a shop in University of Southampton in 2000, it's 25 years ago, and utilized all the training in medicine and research in the best possible manner to drive a program of research in tumor immunology. Over the last 20 years, his laboratory has produced some fine work in the space of cancer immunology. He's done some of these early trials with immunotherapy agents, and now you will hear more from him about the new trials they are doing in cancer vaccine space. So, Christian's work is one I would describe as a perfect translational medicine, where the question starts from patients, where material is collected from patients with cancer. There's detailed laboratory analysis, which gives idea about what's happening in the tumor, what kind of biology is wrong, what kind of targets can be targeted for treatment. Then he goes back to patients with interventions from these laboratory investigations. These interventions are tested in patients, first in patients, as phase 1 or phase 2 studies. Rather than declaring these phase 1s and phase 2 as success, he would learn from these studies as to why these interventions are working or not working in people. Go back to the laboratory, investigate this further, and go back to the patients again. That iterative process of going back from the laboratory and the patients is what one would epitomize as translational research. So you will hear more about this from Christian, and I'm very grateful for Christian to come by and discuss his work, and also very grateful that he is keen to support and develop these cancer vaccine programs in Cancer Institute in the years to come. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, sir. It is a great privilege for us to have the orator with us today for this enlightening event. As a token of our respect and gratitude, I warmly invite Dr. K. Narayanasamy, the Vice Chancellor of the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, to felicitate the orator. Dr. Vijayanand Pandurangan to read the citation that will be presented to the orator.
You'll hear me again. Citation presented to Professor Christian Hermann Heinrich Ottensmeier. Professor Ottensmeier is the 16th illustrious speaker delivering this prestigious oration, which started in the year 2010. He is currently a professor of immuno-oncology, Liverpool Head and Neck Center, Institute of Systems, Molecular and Integrative Biology, UK. He is an adjunct professor at the La Jolla Institute for Immunology in California, USA, and he's a visiting professor at the School of Cancer Sciences, University of Southampton, UK. Professor Ottensmeier is a medical oncologist and is globally recognized in cancer immunology. He completed his medical degree in 1986, post-graduation MD in 1989 from Germany. His PhD was from the University of Southampton, UK in 1999. In between, he had undergone medical training in the fields of medical oncology, hematology, and pathology from different institutions in these countries. His postdoctoral research work was done in Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Boston, USA. The towering achievements of Professor Ottensmeier is epitomized in different facets. In the clinical front, his leadership led to the establishment of immuno-oncology in solid tumors and multi-specialty phase 1 clinical trials for delivery of complex early phase clinical trial portfolio in Southampton and Liverpool. In academic focus, he was responsible in the design, delivery, and evaluation of vaccine trials. Besides, he supervised 24 scientists with clinical and non-medical background for PhDs and 32 others in other academic pursuits. In the span of about last 12 years, Professor Ottensmeier is involved in 40+ research studies as a principal investigator or co-PI or co-investigator, with the total research grant worth more than a staggering £24 million. He has delivered several prestigious keynotes and plenary lectures to date in ASCO, ECIO, ESMO, BTOG, to mention a few. He is also serving in 15 leading international academic, scientific, research, and editorial boards in the UK and Malaysia. In the recent 5 years alone, Professor Ottensmeier has authored 78 research publications in reputed international scientific journals with a H-index of 72, delivering 37,437 citations till June 2024. This portrays his faith in knowledge dissemination and has also impacted the continuum of research chain globally and enriched the relevant scientific literature. The entire fraternity involved in clinical research congratulate him on his achievements, and wish him more laurels in the future.
Thank you, sir. I now warmly invite the Vice Chancellor, Dr. K. Narayanasamy, to address the gathering with a few words.
Respected Professor Hermann Heinrich Ottensmeier, Director of Clinical Research, the Clatterbridge Cancer Institute, Professor of Immuno-Oncology, University of Liverpool, UK. So today's orator of Dr.S. Krishnamurthi Memorial Oration is jointly organized by the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University and Cancer Institute, Adyar. And respected Dr. Siva Sankita, Registrar of this university. And respected Valanaga Nandini is the Dean of Students of the university. And respected Dr. Kalpana Balakrishnan, CEO as a Medical Director of Cancer Institute. And respected Vijay Anand Pondurangan, Professor in the Division of Vaccine Discovery at California and USA, and invited guests, the faculty from this Cancer Institute, and as well as a faculty from the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, and students and my dear students from the various institutions who come over here to participate in the wonderful the Krishnamurthi Memorial Oration. It is with a great pride and a deep respect that I stand before you this evening to felicitate and honor the august gathering on the occasion of the Dr.S. Krishnamurthi Memorial Oration. This oration is not only a tribute to the towering contributions of Dr.S. Krishnamurthi, a pioneer in the field of oncology, but also a platform to inspire the generation of clinicians and researchers to pursue excellence in cancer care and research. Dr. Krishnamurthi dedicated his life to advancing cancer treatment in India at a time when oncology as a specialty was still evolving. His legacy lives on through the visionary work of the Cancer Institute, an institution that continues to provide a comprehensive, compassionate and cutting-edge care to patients irrespective of their social or economic standing. It is therefore most fitting that today's theme is cancer vaccines and stratified medicines towards a rational decision making in immunotherapy for the patient's benefit. This theme reflects the forward-looking vision of both our university as well as the Cancer Institute, Adyar. As we seek to integrate innovation in the precision oncology with the principles of equitable healthcare delivery. Immunotherapy represents a paradigm shift in the way we approach cancer treatment. The dream of harnessing the body's own immune system to recognize, fight, and ultimately control the cancer is no longer a distant aspiration, but a living reality. At the same time, the era of stratified medicine reminds us that one size fits all solutions are inadequate. Instead, national, evidence-based, patient-specific approach are the key to improving the survival, reducing the toxicity, and enhance the quality of life. In this context, it is a privilege to welcome and felicitate, that is Professor Hermann Heinrich Ottensmeier once again as an international acclaimed leader in immuno-oncology. His pioneer research in cancer vaccines, T-cell biology and clinical immunotherapy trials has not only influenced global practice but also provides vital insights for countries like India, where the cancer burden is rising rapidly. Due to that is more on awareness as well as screening. Not will be that is we are more on the prevalence of disease on India than other parts, because we are will be more nowadays will be getting a more awareness, so that they are come for early screening, so that we are finding out we are seeing that rising, not a real fact. It is not a real fact. Previously it was not having that awareness. So the awareness is coming up more. So they are coming for early screening for better outcomes. Sir, your work stands as a background for a clinician and scientist who strive to bridge the gap between the bench and the bedside, between the scientific innovation and the patient welfare. We are honored by your presence and look forward to your oration, which will undoubtedly enlighten and inspire all of us gathered here. As the Vice Chancellor of the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, I take this moment to reaffirm our commitment to strengthening academic clinical collaborations, fostering a translational research, and training the next generation of physicians who are not only skilled clinicians but also empathetic leaders and healers. On this solemn yet celebratory occasions, I extend my heartfelt felicitation to the organizers, the Cancer Institute, ADAR, and to all participants who are a part of this continuing journey of hope, science, and service. Let me close with the timeless words of Mahatma Gandhi. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the services of others. Dr. Krishnamurti exemplified this spirit, and it is our collective responsibility to carry his mission forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With great pleasure, I now invite Professor Hermann Heinrich Ottensmeier, Director of Clinical Research, the Clatterbridge Cancer Center, and Professor of Immuno-Oncology, University of Liverpool, to deliver the Dr.S. Krishnamurthi Memorial Oration titled Cancer Vaccines and Stratified Medicine Towards Rational Decision Making in Immunotherapy for Patient Benefit. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I know I was the smallest in my year in medical school, so that really has stuck with me. So thank you so much for the enormous honor that you're bestowing on me here today. Thank you to the panel that's introduced me and Vijay for your extremely kind invitation. It is with a deep privilege for me to be allowed to talk in front of you and to tell you a little bit about my journey of how I got to trying to improve outcomes in patients with solid tumors. So, if you will forgive me, and I will probably pronounce this really badly and mangle it, Panakam, and I hope that this won't send you to sleep. I was a little bit nervous, so I wrote it down. So the perspective I'm bringing to this problem of treating the patient's the patient's cancer with the immune system is that of a clinician. So I am laboratory trained, but my clinical practice is what drives me in my interaction. So I look in my clinic at what is happening to my patients, and I try to figure out what we might be able to do to make these patients better. Over the last 15 years, since 2011 to be precise, cancer immunotherapy has become a mainstay of the treatment in many solid tumors and some hematological malignancies. And the small number of patients that we genuinely make better, who go away and live their normal lives after treatment, have made us really hungry to try and find a way to offer this opportunity to more patients. So my perspective today is to try and offer a view of where this field might go from a very personal perspective, of course, and to give you a sense of what might be coming in the international community in terms of cancer immunotherapy, but of course also what we might hope to work with the team here in the Cancer Institute to deliver locally. So let's begin with the conundrum. So cancer immunotherapy in a nutshell is the problem that if the cancer develops, the immune system must have failed. So the question then becomes, is there any way in which we might re-establish immune control? And if this immune control can be induced, can it be specific for the cancer cells? Because as you know, most of our treatments, like surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, have side effects on the healthy organs, either because we cut pieces of them away or because we poison not just the cancer cells but also the healthy cells. So the big story really is about making things specific. And so if we look a little bit more at the immune system in patients with cancer, then there is a balance, like in actually all fields of life, isn't it? So the balance between immune suppression, the cancer trains the immune system not to do its job, or if you're lucky and you get the right treatments, immune activation. And if that happens, then you are able to remove the cancer cells. And it's really quite intriguing that even in patients with advanced cancer that has spread from where the cancer started, occasionally you can make this cancer go away altogether. And we now know that if patients live for about 2 to 3 years after treatment is completed and their cancer has been removed successfully by immunotherapy, they're probably cured. So the question then becomes, in the next step, what are the cells, what are the mechanisms that allow this to happen? And it turns out that the key proponents in this battle against cancer are cells that are born in the thymus, a gland behind our breastbone, and these are therefore called T cells, T for thymus. And these cells that recognize foreign molecules and differences that the cancer cells bring to the table. And here these graphs show you what happens if you have many or few of these cells. So the graphs represent 2 kinds of head and neck cancer. One which is really common, driven by alcohol and smoking. They're the ones in black. These are patients who don't have a viral infection. And out of India, quite commonly is a cancer driven in the same spaces in the oropharynx through the human papillomavirus. And what these curves demonstrate is if you have many T cells, so these are the top curves here in black or in blue, then the patient's outcome is much, much better. And you can see if you go out as far as 15 or 16 years, in patients who have lots of these immune cells, almost 80% of the patients live and don't die from their cancer. But if these immune cells are not very abundant, then more than half of the patients pass away. So this illustrates that these T cells must play an important role in the biology of the cancer. And so they're the interface between the patient's immune system and the cancer cells. So one of the things that's come out of the work that I've been privileged to do with VJ is that you can look at these cells under the microscope and count them, and that's what illustrated here. So at the top, the brown dots are the T cells, and you can see that in the tumor at the top, which is actually a lung cancer tumor in this case, there are lots of brown dots. These are the tumors that the immune cells find interesting and that therefore they're engaging with. Whereas at the bottom is a tumor where there are a few immune cells still around, so the immune system is still trying, but it's clearly not working very effectively. And so one of the really big puzzles that to date remains unanswered, and to which I'm going to offer some comments of examples, is what do these T cells actually do? So the T cells recognize the cancer cells through a molecule that is on the surface of the T cells that is called the T cell receptor. So when I talk to my patients about cancer immunotherapy, I say, imagine it like a sniffer dog. The nose of the sniffer dog picks out where the cancer cells are and recognizes the cancer cells. And if it recognizes the cancer cancer cells. It latches on and eats the cancer cell. So that's in a nutshell how a T cell would work. Now, what these cancer cells emit, or what the T cells recognize, is a whole range of different things. And these can be very different to the healthy cells in the body, and that is the product of when the cancer cells become cancer cells in the first place. Or they can be molecules that are really similar to the healthy cells. And actually, if you look at any one cancer cell, it's probably 90% similar to healthy cells. So the trick for the immune system is to distinguish between what's different in the cancer cells and in the healthy cells. And that is really where a lot of the work in this field is going internationally, to figure out what these differences are. Because, you see, this is really important, because our immune system is trying to recognize what's different from ourselves, from our healthy cells, and is trying to ignore what is identical. So in other words, you don't really want your immune system to attack your hair cells or your eye cells or your skin cells all the time. That is really bad for you. And if it is really active, then patients die of these autoimmune responses. So the puzzle then becomes what sits between what is identical to our healthy cells and what is unique to the cancer cells. And it turns out that there is a spectrum of molecules that might serve this purpose. For head and neck cancer, I've just made a list of such molecules, and you can see there are lots of them. And so the puzzle then for the clinicians and those patients, people who wish to develop immunotherapy, is to figure out which of these individual pots to choose from and what to put into their vaccine. And therein lies the current paradigm that we haven't really answered. So if we think about the process again, and I told you that T cells are protective, then the immediate correlate to that is that in order to make immunotherapy work, you need to get more T cells. So the question then becomes from there, is that possible? And what can you do to train T cells to recognize the cancer cells and essentially to turn this cold tumor into a tumor that has many immune cells? And the real trick here is to understand that the immune system makes decisions about what it recognizes. And the school the T cells go to, so they're born in the bone marrow, then they're released into the blood, they go to school and go to get their training. And this training organ is the thymus, so this gland behind the breastbone. And the T cells that recognize molecules that are self, they're deleted. The molecules that they never encountered can't shape them. So you're left with cells that have been activated a little bit, enough to get their A levels and to be released into the wild, but not enough to recognize the self in the patient's body. And so then and that is ultimately really what we're trying to distinguish and figure out. Now, when I started in my own PhD many years ago, and when we tried to make vaccines for patients with lymphoma, everybody said, well, this can never work. And indeed, for almost 25 years, the field has thought cancer vaccines are a bust. And indeed, one of the key proponents of this field, a surgeon from the US, from the NIH, called Steve Rosenberg, wrote a very influential paper in one of the top journals in 2004 saying, we should move on, cancer vaccines have nothing to offer. We should just do better things with ourselves and to our patients. And then a really seminal study was published and released at the end of 2023, in which a group using an mRNA vaccine, so the same group, Moderna, that made some of the COVID vaccines, studied whether the addition of a vaccine to standard treatment in patients with a melanoma could make a difference. And the data suggested that roughly half of the patients that would otherwise relapse could be prevented from doing so by giving a vaccine. And these are the initial curves, and the data have really remained very consistent and have really set the community alight with a new hope that this kind of approach actually has something useful to offer to our patients. And there are many groups that are now working in this space, including BioNTech, but big pharma, small pharma, and academic groups like ourselves. So we are clearly only a small cog in a very big wheel. And this data has set the community not only alight, but in the UK it has driven a really big national effort to make cancer vaccines and their development part of how we think about cancer research. And nowadays everyone's a cancer vaccinologist. So what has changed? And that's sort of the puzzle that you'll no doubt be grappling with. And because the data are now accumulating at a really staggering rate, and thousands of patients are being entered into these vaccine trials, and the data are suggesting that we're actually making a fraction of them better. So the reasons, I think, we're making better vaccines. And COVID has been a really a period in which this kind of information just became visible to the community. We're also much better at knowing when to give vaccines. It turns out that in the journey between the early diagnosis of cancer and the disease progression, gradually there is a failure of the patient's immune system over time. So you start off with a pretty normal immune system, and then as your cancer gets worse, the cancer itself dampens the way the immune system works. So when in the journey of the patient you give the vaccine makes a bit different. And of course, we're also getting smarter about what to put into the vaccine. So what should we train the T cells to recognize? We're still a long way from an established product that will work across different tumor types, so the best way of making vaccines is unknown, but we, as you no doubt imagine, RNA vaccines have a really big head start. So if you now think about the concept of making such a vaccine, then the process is really theoretically quite simple. You read out what is unique in the cancer cells, you turn that difference into a chemical product, so RNA or DNA or protein, and then you give that to the patient and let the patient's immune system decide what it wants to do with that. So, in other words, you have to have two conditions. One is you have an immune system that can actually still do its work. That's condition number one. And the second, you need to pick something that is genuinely different in the cancer cells to the healthy cells, because otherwise it just won't work. And so then conceptually, if you think about that again, you could make a new vaccine for each patient. These are called personalized cancer vaccines. And these are all the vogue at the moment, because they usually are able to pick out small differences, and I'll come to that a little bit later, that are only in the cancer cells as the product of the cancer cells becoming cancerous in the first state. Or you can pick molecules that are shared between many patients. So human papillomavirus is one such example. The big advantage is if you have something that is only unique for one patient, it is very specific, but it's hard to make and very expensive. And if you have something that is shared between many patients, then you can use the same vaccine for lots of different patients. So let me tell you about a failed clinical trial, and we had a discussion about one of the trials that has been set up here in Chennai, and we're mulling over whether failure genuinely is failure. So let me take you through this story and then make my case. So we worked with BioNTech, this mRNA vaccine company, and we thought, well, for head and neck cancer, there are viruses that cause cancer in about 30% of patients, and these are human papillomavirus. So these fulfill a lot of criteria of a vaccine that's interesting. It's new, the normal body doesn't contain any sequences from human papillomavirus. It's different. Our immune system is good at picking up viral sequences. So this should be an easy hurdle to make a vaccine against. So that's what we did. We did a small study in only about 30 patients with head and neck cancer and other HPV-driven tumors. We were in the middle of COVID when the study was sort of halfway through, so it took us an enormous amount of time. The message was we gave the vaccine to two sets of patients. Patients who had no measurable cancer, so who were after surgery and treatment by the oncologist clear of their disease, where we worried that they might still relapse over time. So we call this setting the adjuvant setting, to help, in this case, the treatment that hadn't gone before. And also treated patients with cancer that had come back, for which there was no other option. And much to our surprise, most of the patients, actually 85% or so of the patients, were able to make an immune response that we could detect in the blood of the patients, and that was reactive to the content of the vaccine. So that came as a bit of a surprise, because I had expected that patients with end-stage disease, where oncologists have essentially sent them away to go and put their affairs in order because we have nothing useful to offer, nonetheless the immune system in many of these patients was still able to recognize the vaccine. And then we asked, what are the changes in blood cells that recognize the vaccine over time? Remember, the vaccine contains sequences from the virus, so we were looking for virus-reactive T cells in the blood. And we asked, what happens before vaccine, what exists already in the patient, because they've got a cancer caused by a virus, and what happens after vaccination? Can we pick up any changes? And do the T cells that we hope to see have the right features? Are they the sort of T cells that you think might be useful to the patient? And to our real surprise, that actually was the case, and that's what these curves show. So we looked at the T cells in the blood, and they were not very common. Green are T cells that are seeing one segment of the human papillomavirus, which is called E6. And then the pale green is a second component that is also in a second vaccine. We mixed two vaccines together that were detectable. And you can see that each dot is the measurement of a quantity of these T cells in the blood. And we've expressed these as the percentage, so the number per 100 cells of these T cells that were specific for any one piece of the human papillomavirus, and looked at those over time. And you can see some of these responses are really big. 3% of all the T cells in the blood were seeing that one piece from the vaccine that we were encoding. So this is really quite extraordinary, because it's almost as big as what you would see with a natural infection. These responses were durable, so at the end of just over 6 months, we were still able to track them. And when we looked at the features of these cells, they had all the right goodies that we would have thought they should be able to have if they were ready to kill cancer cells. So made PD-1, they made molecules of activation, they made molecules that tell us that they're still ready to rumble. And we were able to demonstrate, this is work done not by my lab, but by the collaborative team in BioNTech, that when you assembled the T cells in the laboratory and tested whether they were actually seeing human papillomavirus, they were actually doing exactly that. So far so good. This is not particularly novel, because many vaccines have achieved something very similar. The durability, the magnitude of the response are unusual. When you look at a T cell, however, they have a molecular barcode, something that is unique to each individual T cell and their descendants. So this is the molecule called the T cell receptor. So if you look at 10 different T cells, they all have a different T cell receptor. And if you look at 1,000 different T cells, they all have a different T cell receptor still. And therein lies the uniqueness of our human immune system, that it can make lots of different cells that are all subtly different to pick up different molecules that are perhaps threatening our health. Now, this is the sniffer nose of the dog that I was talking about earlier. But you can also, while that is the functional part of the T cell, you can also look at it as a marker for any one particular T cell, because it and all its progeny will have the same T cell receptor. So you can use this tool to now figure out what happens to a particular kind of T cell and its progeny over time. So that is what these bar graphs show. So we asked which of these T cell receptors that we think react to human papillomavirus were present before we did anything to the patient. So this is essentially probing the natural immune response that is present. And there are the ones that are in the pale green. And then we ask, did the vaccination expand those cells? So each of these bar graphs are pairs. So this is before and this is after vaccination, before and after, and so on. And then in dark green, I've highlighted the ones that were not detectable at baseline, that were only present after vaccination. And you can see that in most patients, both groups have expanded, but the ones that were probably new have expanded more. So what it suggests then is the vaccine trains a new group of T cells that probably weren't present in the patient before. Now, again, that's perhaps not so exciting, but we then asked whether these cells can go to the cancer, and that is indeed what the outcome was. So that we could find many of these T cells that were present in the blood, that were seeing the vaccine content, were also going to the cancer and expanding in the cancer. So this is really quite novel, because it illustrates that even if you're vaccinating against a shared antigen, and you look at what the T cells are doing, not only do they expand, but they also go to where they're supposed to do. But when you look at the clinical outcomes, we haven't cured cancer. So these are the survival curves of the patients that had measurable disease, and you could see we probably made the patients live a bit longer, but we certainly didn't make any cancer go away. And this is, I think, at the heart of where cancer vaccines have always failed. You train the T cells, they go to where the tumor is, and then the tumor turns them off again, just like it does the healthy cells. And so the question then becomes, what can you do in order to overcome that? Well, the same vaccine is being tested in a comparative study with standard immunotherapy. And so I use this vaccine in my clinical practice. I'm one of many centers, but we've treated the largest number in the UK of patients. And I can tell you that when we just use a standard immunotherapy alone, it also doesn't work very well. None of the patients I've treated with the antibody alone have had any durable response. So you've got a vaccine that doesn't work on its own, an antibody that doesn't work on its own, but when you mix the two together, suddenly patients have major responses. And I now have, out of my 6 patients that I've treated in this way, 4 that have had a major response. So let's assume that that's about 50%. And some of these patients are now well over 2 years out from starting their treatment, and we did scans and they have no evidence of cancer. So I think what this begins to highlight is that the vaccines haven't actually failed. And there's this really beautiful story that is has been developed here in Chennai in the Cancer Institute using a dendritic cell vaccine, which looks just like what we've observed here. And I think that probably will have worked also. You just need to figure out what to give with the vaccine to turn that into clinical success. So there's a lot of ongoing discussions with Dr. Priya about how we might be able to figure out whether the same rules that we found here apply there also. So the other piece is we're going to try and take this into patients who haven't yet had their surgery, so into the neoadjuvant setting, because then when you take the cancer out, you can look more consistency in these tumors. So I think the surprise really becomes when you take 2 things that don't really work very well, put them together, and suddenly you see something really quite major happen. So the other piece I talked about was making a new vaccine for each individual patient, so these personalized cancer vaccines. And conceptually, that's also not really that difficult. It's just expensive, laborious, and time-consuming. But if you have deep pockets, and many of these pharma companies have deep pockets, then you can take the tumor and you can read out what all the abnormalities are in that cancer. And then you can compare the genes, the abnormalities in the cancer included, to the cells that are in the blood, the healthy cells, and you can subtract one from the other, and you're left with the differences. Then you go through a complicated bioinformatic process that I don't really know how to use. It's like a black box for us. But you can use the sequences and predict what the immune system might be interested in. And then you can make a string of beads of these differences and then put it into your favorite vaccine backbone and see whether the patient's immune system thinks that it agrees. And that's what we're doing again in head and neck cancer with a French company called Transgene. So this all started from a conversation, random conversation almost, because I had a patient that was referred to me with lung cancer that I really wanted to make a vaccine for. So I went to Transgene, who at that time weren't working in this space, and asked them whether they would be willing to help. They were really good at making cancer vaccines, just not personalized vaccines. And they allowed us to go forward. The regulators in the UK approved, but we weren't quick enough, so the patient passed away by the time we had made the vaccine ready. But we were able to demonstrate in preclinical, in mouse models, that this vaccine actually did what it was supposed to do. And that led to a whole program of clinical trial testing that I'm referring to here now. The TG stands for Transgene, 4050 is their commercial shorthand. So TG 4050 is the cancer vaccine that is personalized in patients with human papillomavirus. So the process is again relatively simple. Patients have their diagnosis, they have their surgery. We take a bit of the tissue from the surgery, then they have their chemoradiotherapy. And in the process of giving them the chemoradiotherapy, Transgene goes away and with its partner NEC makes the vaccine for us. So everyone who's in the trial has a vaccine. And then we've treated half of the patients with the vaccine up front and half of the patients if there was any recurrence. And again, what happened in the blood of the patients was that they made very nice immune responses. And these immune responses were against the molecules that we're finding and taking from the cancer. Not every molecule. We put into up to 40 molecules of these flavors into the vaccine. Roughly half to a third of the vaccine targets were making immune responses. But the clinical piece is really astounding. So bear in mind, this is 16 patients in each arm, so it's a tiny study, but it's a randomized phase 1 study, because I had argued that we needed to know objectively whether there was any difference if the vaccine was given early, and none of the patients have relapsed who've had the vaccine, and 3 of the patients, say 3 out of 16, who haven't had the vaccine have relapsed. This is astounding, because one of these patients had had 6 recurrences from his head and neck cancer, every time getting shorter and shorter, and he's now 2.5 years out. It's the longest he's ever been disease-free. So it argues that if you pick the right content and give it at the right time, these vaccines can be highly effective and prevent cancer from coming back. So it would be really quite good fun if we could persuade transgene to also work here in Chennai. I think the really intriguing part for me is that this worked on its own. I've told you previously that for advanced disease, HPV-driven recurrent cancer, the vaccine alone didn't do very much. But in this particular setting, the vaccine was perfectly able to make immune responses that seemed to also lead to clinical benefit. And that the trial, the randomized trial, has completed recruitment phase 2 and is just moving into the randomized phase 3 part. So one of the questions was, of course, were these all the patients that had a really good immune response anyway, and you just were tweaking that a little bit? And no, that's not the case. And what I've sort of illustrated here is that most of these patients had awful cancer with not very many immune cells and all the features of a cancer that would not respond to immunotherapy. So therein lies another lesson, and that is when the cancer cells make metastasis initially, I think that the cancer cells travel on their own and they haven't yet brought along their protective coat of tumor microenvironment that blocks the immune system from recognizing the cancer cells, so they're vulnerable at that time. And there are a number of data sets in a whole variety of different settings that argue that that is the case, including some mouse data that demonstrate this experimentally in colorectal cancer. So I think what I've tried to persuade you of is that vaccines train the immune system the right way and that they can be useful in the right setting. And here's data from something completely unrelated. This is a study in head and neck cancer that has been resected, in which standard immunotherapy has been used. And most of these patients don't benefit from this when the cancer comes back. As I said earlier, about 10% of patients. But when you give this immunotherapy in the context of surgery, suddenly, again, there is a really big difference of those patients who've had the standard of care immunotherapy. And I think it illustrates the same problem or the same biology, that the micrometastatic disease that we can't see on scans and that will yet kill our patients when we allow it to grow can be more effectively treated by immunotherapy if you get in there early. And so the prediction would be, if you now combine these two together, so standard immunotherapy plus a vaccine, you will, just like in advanced disease, see major effects. So this is one strategy in which you can make vaccines, but there are big hurdles in that. So not all cancers have many of the molecules that you could turn into a vaccine. And here is the sort of different tumor types. Melanoma sits at the very top. Lung cancer comes relatively second. And then sort of there is a decreasing number of chances that you might have for such a vaccine to be makeable, that to be even producible. So clearly we won't be able to do this for every patient. And that is important because we know from another setting with another personalized cancer vaccine, this time in liver cancer, that how broad the vaccine works really doesn't matter. So this is another astounding story. This is not one of our own. It comes out of the United States from a company called Gineas. They made a DNA vaccine, so a different delivery platform. And they tested the vaccine together with the standard immunotherapy I've just referenced in liver cancer, hepatocellular carcinoma. Now, immunotherapy on its own does nothing in hepatocellular carcinoma. The vaccine alone probably won't do anything either. But when you add the two together, here's a cancer that we all consider to be completely inert from the immune system perspective, and suddenly 3 out of the patients that have been treated had a complete response, cancer gone. What emerged was when they looked at how many immune responses, or how many of the molecules in the string of beads the immune system could recognize, that linked quite tightly to clinical outcomes. So if you only had a few immune responses, then the vaccine didn't work so well, the patient didn't have as good a response. But if you had lots of immune responses, then the vaccine worked better, and all the patients who had a complete response had really good and really broad immune responses. So it's a little bit like we know from antibiotic resistance. You know, if you have just one antibiotic, then the bugs, they sort of get around it and live anyway. And if you use combinations of antibiotics, then it is much harder for the bacteria, or in our case, the cancer cells, to escape from immune control or from antibiotic control in this case. And as a matter of fact, they also observed that there was in one of these patients a lesion, a metastasis, which they removed by surgery, and they could demonstrate that the target of the vaccine that looked to be protective had gone missing. So the cancer had learned to live without that target of the vaccine, and no wonder the vaccine couldn't help anymore. So I think the principle therefore becomes you need to pick the right antigen, you need to make your vaccine as broad as possible, you need to pick the right setting, and you need to protect the new T cells from being turned off by, for example, standard immunotherapy with pembrolizumab. So I've gone on a bit about personalized cancer vaccines, so very briefly we're trying to do something very similar, this time using DNA because RNA is expensive and difficult to make. We've teamed up with a company in the UK called Touchlight. The Medical Research Council has funded the study, and I've just at the bottom linked all the people who are needed to do this. So, you know, the funders, the MRC, the sequencing is done by Genome Scan, Myneo does the antigen prediction, Touchlight makes the vaccine, the National Health Blood Transfusion Service puts it into vials that we are allowed to give it to patients. We use a delivery system by a company called PharmaJet, and then clearly we need to do that in our center. So it's a long-winded process, and I think that's one of the reasons why these personalized cancer vaccines are unlikely to become really widely available, because it's just so complicated and so time-consuming. So we'll see nonetheless whether we can actually deliver that to the clinic. Our trial in advanced lung cancer is going to start hopefully this month, although we're a little bit behind, so maybe early October. And then we'll see whether my idea that combining an anti-PD-1 antibody with a vaccine genuinely can make cancer better. And we're going to do all the same things we did in the head and neck cancer trial. We're going to take biopsies before and afterwards, look at the T cells and see whether they actually make a difference. So we talked also about lots of molecules being immunogenic, and this was one of the discussions we had with Dr. Priya, actually, can't remember how long I've been here, it feels like forever, yesterday, and we were wondering what might be visible in the blood. So I thought I'd pick a few data sets that are unpublished, and I sort of added them at the last minute because I thought it might inform our further discussions. So I had argued in my previous slides that there would be a difference between the molecules that are tolerized, so self-antigens, and molecules that are unique to the cancer cells, these mutational antigens. And so that's what we tried to figure out. And essentially we took T cells from patients with lung cancer, we took tumor cells from the patients with lung cancer, we sequenced all the differences like I've done in the, described to you in the personalized cancer vaccine trials, and we asked, are there molecules that are present in these cancers that are present in healthy structures? So carcinoembryonic antigen and mesothelin are such molecules. Are there molecules that we think are probably not in healthy cells and yet commonly found in tumor cells? So these fall into the pot of a category of antigens called cancer testis antigens. And we picked two of those, in this case HTERT and MHD4B. And we used some extra ones that we didn't really know what they might do. And then we asked the team in La Jolla, in the La Jolla Institute, to take our data after. So we took the tumor cells, we sent those for sequencing, and then we asked the team in the La Jolla Institute to do the antigen prediction for us. And so what we found, it's a small series, it's only 11 patients, that really these patients looked like all the other cancer patients that Vijay's lab has supported us in analyzing, and there are about 110 of these patients now, so this small cohort fits very well into the big story. And we find there are T cells in all the patients, varying degrees, and most of them, here are the non-T cells and the T cells that are immune cells. And most of the patients have more of the CD4 T cells, the helper T cells or the effector T cells, than they have CD8 T cells. So all of that was very much like we had expected from our previous data. And so then we asked, if you now look at immune responses against these mutational antigens, does the patient's immune system pick these up in the blood? And the answer to my real surprise was, yes, actually it does. And so each one of these bars is one mutation in one individual patient, so I've presented 4 patients here. And I think this is not about the individual details, it's about the patterns. So at the top are the CD4 T cells, and you can see that in this and this patient, there are lots of reactivities. In these 2 patients, there are few. In this patient and this patient also, there are T cells that are of the cytotoxic phenotype, that are the ones that we think are the important ones for killing, and they're much less abundant in the blood. So we're still trying to work that out. So I was really grateful when I could discuss with Dr. Priya yesterday that actually she's finding something very similar in the data here also. So if 2 groups come up with the same answer, then there's probably something right in this. And then, this is to my real surprise, we also find T cells against the shared antigens. And some of the abundance and the amount of interferon gamma these cells make is quite comparable to the neoantigens. And the light green are the control molecules. So we thought, well, if the assay works really well, it should work against the tumor antigen reactive cells, and we also should be able to recover immune response to viral antigens. Lots of people have had the flu, or lots of people have had COVID, and indeed we have a large data set that COVID is very immunogenic. So you can see in comparison here that there are some patients who make not very much of the immune responses. So the red is a sort of cutoff, and then there are some patients who make really grown-up T cell response against these shared antigens. So the message here is, again, not about the specific molecules, but really is about the fact that these T cells are likely going to be able to be protective. And then, therefore, if that is the case, you might be able to amplify them with vaccination and perhaps also induce new T cells. So this gives me a lot of hope that this small data set will pan out as predictive for other settings. So then, if I close this part of the lecture, then cancer vaccines, in my view, I think is my prediction, will be a key building block for combinatorial immunotherapy. But we clearly need still to do a lot of work. We need to figure out what to put into the vaccines, what the best platform is, when we need to give them, and what to give them with. But I think it is very clear now that before I finish being an oncologist, we will be using these vaccines in clinical practice. Clearly, however, in the cancer tissue, it's not just the immune cells that play a role. There are the cancer cells themselves and loads of other cells that are either innate immune cells or cells that have to do with how the tissue is built. These are called fibroblasts, and if they're in the cancer, then they're called cancer-associated fibroblasts. And they all have an impact on why immunotherapy might not work. So I've grayed out the not enough T cells because that's what I've spoken a lot about. But of course, the T cell can also be turned off in the tumor microenvironment, and some of that is what the tumor cells do, or they can't even get to the T cell, to the tumor cells. And this way it becomes actually quite interesting. So if you now look at large numbers of patients, then you can begin to see patterns of distribution of these cells. And in head and neck cancer here, 4 sort of pots of categories emerge. The tumors where there are lots of immune cells, the tumors where there's nothing going on at all, these ones here. And then there are the tumors where there are fibrotic cells, immune cells are being turned off by the fibroblasts. So if this is the case, then maybe we can begin making predictions about what an individual patient might need. And that's what I meant by the stratified bit in my title. So we've already talked a lot about T cells, so I'll skip that because I'm way over time. But the prediction is if you have lots of the right T cells, then the standard immunotherapy will work. And indeed, that's about 30 or 25% of the population. And if you now look at the immune cells in cancer, and these are data that come out of Vijay's lab again, these are the cells that we found in a group of roughly 100 head and neck cancer patients. So these are tumors that we've disaggregated and then looked at the immune cells in the tissue, just the T cells. And each dot here is one individual T cell. And the size of the dot tells us how many siblings there are of any one T cell receptor. So if you've got a really large dot, the family has many siblings. And if you've only got a tiny dot, you only have a single member of that family present in the tumor. And what is beginning to emerge is that within the cancer tissue, because within the cytotoxic T cells and within the helper cells, there are groups of cells that behave similarly. And we can now allocate function to these cells. So, for example, these cells are likely the ones that are protective. They have all the features of being able to kill tumor cells. And that is true for both the CD4 and the CD8 T cells. But it's not just the good guys that are doing this. There is expansion also in a group of cells that act a little bit like the military police that control the guys with the guns. So these are called regulatory T cells. So, even the terminology is quite similar. And in many of these patients, these cells are also expanded. And so what it argues is that within the cancer as it develops, there's not just a group of T cells that are trying to get the cancer cells, but also a group of T cells that are trying to dampen that down. And it turns out that that is part of how our immune system works. So our lab, again led in Vijay's lab and by a very gifted postdoc who is called Simon Eschweiler and who runs his own group in the MD Anderson, who were able to demonstrate that this kind of biology is abundant across many solid tumors. And indeed, most of the solid tumors that have been reported have exactly this inhibitory cell. Now, this is really important because just imagine you make a vaccine that trains the wrong T cells, that makes the cancer vaccine reactive cells inhibitory if you have those in the tumor. So that's one of the pieces that the community really hasn't considered. But we know from our data that these cells will also respond, for example, to immunotherapy. So if you give the wrong patient standard immunotherapy, you're going to make the problem worse rather than better. And in lung cancer, indeed, we know that that does happen in about 10% of patients. So the second prediction then will need to be for each individual patient. We need to figure out whether these T cells are abundant. And again, we've worked out how you might be able to do that. And you could target them with another set of immunotherapies that are perfectly available in the clinic. We would have to build a trial that would look at that kind of question. And that leaves us with the last population. These are the fibroblasts. These are cells that would normally provide integrity to our tissue. The cancer cell subsumes them into the tumor microenvironment. So here's head and neck cancer, a nest of tumor cells. And you can see the stuff in between are the cancer-associated fibroblasts. And here are the T cells that are sort of congregated around the tumor cell nest, protected by the fibroblasts, and they're trying to get in and they can't. So we need to do something about the fibroblasts also. And that is really important in head and neck cancer. It accounts for about 40% of the patients where this is a major problem. So then the fourth prediction would be that for tumors with this dominant cancer-associated fibroblast phenotype, we need to find molecules that will block those in these blocking cells. And again, there are a number of examples of what might be possible in the clinic. So then we're left sort of with an overall biological model. We're left with finding out what you should put into your vaccine, and there are a number of options. They need to be compared and optimized. And then we need to read out what makes an individual cancer patients tick. You know, we need to know which of these categories they fall into. But if we were to do that systematically, I'm certain that we would make a large number of patients additionally better simply by using the drugs that we already have in a smarter way. And one of the pieces of work that we would really like to do, and lots of discussions have been had over the last few days, is how this might apply to patients in this region here in Chennai. And Dr. Vijay Lakshmi here in the institution is, I think, extremely well set up to do this kind of assessment. So it will be extraordinarily interesting to see what we found in early cancer, lung and head and neck in the UK will be reproduced in Chennai. So opening the opportunity for looking at these kind of stratified immune approaches. And we can do that using relatively simple tools in which we can look at the tumor microenvironment. So my last slide is this is what I think we should be doing as a community. And if you're not driven just by one product that you want to sell, say your anti-PD-1 antibody by Merck, for example, then you have the opportunity to stand back and ask, well, what should we pick for an individual patient if you figured out? So no T cells, a vaccine will no doubt be needed. Lots of T cells and CAFs, you need to get rid of the CAFs. You have tumors that have already a lot of immune infiltrate. Well, probably anti-PD-1 will be sufficient. So I think we're about to enter an era into which training antigen-specific T cells will become one of the elements, but using our compounds in a better way for the individual patients will be absolutely critical. And that's, I think, where I would like to leave it, and thank you for your attention, and I'd be delighted to take any questions that you might have. And as you can see, I've missed my own cue, so Nandri. Okay, so apparently no questions allowed. Okay, question allowed.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Christian. I think it was a wonderful talk. I'm sure everybody...
I think you need to shout.
Yeah,
better.
Yeah. Thank you for the wonderful talk. I think everybody here really enjoyed it. And my question to you is about the first part where you had worked with HNSCC with HPV. So you had spoken about this particular cohort which had HPV and which had TILs in the low and moderate range. And you had shown data about the infiltration status. There is literature which says that HLA can be downregulated in several of these in the context of cervical cancer, because we've worked extensively with that. Have you seen that happen with head and neck cancers? Have you seen a downregulation which can actually hamper the infiltration or which can actually, kind of blind the CD8 cells? Have you seen something like that?
So the answer is yes and no. So yes, because we see tumors that have by immunohistochemistry, a lot of HLA class 1 and class 2, and some that don't have very much. It's rare to not see any at all. However, the problem is that what a T cell might need to recognize a tumor cell may be very low and below the detection of immunohistochemistry. So the overall genomic data suggests that this clearly does happen. That's probably not as common as we have thought. The other piece is, if the T cells recognize tumor antigen, or if NK cells recognize tumor antigen or tumor cells, they should make interferon gamma, and that should re-upregulate the HLA molecule. So I don't know where this balance will sit, except that we look by immunohistochemistry in, say, 300 head and neck cancers, and there's a smattering, a small number that we can see no HLA molecules in. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and it's clearly been reported that that can be a reason for immune failure. I just think it's been overcalled in the literature, or probably not carefully enough, assessed carefully enough.
Thank you.
So for the TCR analysis you did, I would like to know about the...
I think you need to shout into the microscope. I'm a bit deaf, actually.
For the TCR analysis you did, yeah. So what are the age groups you have considered? Age group for the patients.
I didn't hear.
What are the age group of the patients?
What age group?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So it's HPV positive disease, median age about 45, 50, 55, something. The patients with HPV negative disease are about 10 years older. So overall in Liverpool, the age group of patients with advanced head and neck cancer is quite similar to here, so median around 58, 60. 10 years younger than in many other parts of the country, in the UK, for example.
So for the T-cell vaccines, so for the older patients, it will be like, it won't be working as such, as efficient as the younger people?
So let me see if I have understood. You're asking whether the immune system in older patients will work as well as in younger patients?
Because the clonal expansion will be less in the older patients, right? The clonal expansion of the T cells will be lesser.
So in the immune cells in the tumor, and Vijay, correct me if I'm wrong, we see no correlate with the patient's age in the cohort that we have. When we use cancer vaccines in patients up to 85, 90, we see perfectly good T-cell responses to what's in the vaccine. So this is a study that is long reported using a prostate cancer antigen. There wasn't any suggestion that the older patients did any less well. So there's clearly decay of thymic output over time. So if you look at the number of new T-cells that any patient makes, say, in any one day, then there is a reduction, but it never goes to zero, I don't think. And clearly, even very old people can make very good immune responses. So I think the age is probably not the driving in any of this. Whether, if you now were to look at very large groups, say 500 patients with under 40 and 500 patients above 80, whether you'd be able to pick up difference, that I don't know. I don't know any on such data. In the small data sets that we've looked at, it doesn't seem to matter.
It's a wonderful talk, doctor. And I have a question. In case of HPV positive head and neck cancers, does the positivity indicate positivity at the level of DNA or at the level of RNA? Because generally literature says that the outcome is better if it is transcriptionally active.
I think we should look, because I think you're right. So I think about this, one gene is one unit of immune response, say E1. Then E5 has another unit of immune response. E6 has another one, E7. So you would predict that if you have lots of these genes present at an RNA level, DNA doesn't help because it needs to be made into protein. So RNA is necessary, and RNA is probably the easier way to look, unless you look for the protein itself. So you would predict that the more of the genes are expressed, the more there is a potential for an immune response. But of course, just because you have, say, E2, doesn't mean that you also have an E2 immune response. If you look at antibody levels, it's very clear. So if you have E2 in the tumor, you by and large get an E2 antibody response. If you have E6, you get an E6 antibody response. So if that is true, then for the antibody response to mature from IgM to IgG, you must have CD4 T cells at least. And I think there's a good likelihood if you've got helper cells, you've also got effector cells. But that hasn't really been looked at, and you're absolutely right. It's absolutely spot on as a question. Thank you. Now, I'm not sure whether we're allowed to continue this much longer.
Hello, sir.
We're getting permission, that's okay. So please.
Sir, do cancer cells have lysosomes? Lysosomes?
Yes.
Suicidal back. By stimulating the lysosomes to open up the enzymes from lysosomes, can it kill the cancer cells? My question. Can we do that and can we kill cancer cells?
So I think this is beyond my expertise, because I only know about T cells. You would have thought that when the content of the tumor cells is released, that will in some way again be used for a new immune response. Whether cellular compartments that are from the tumor cells themselves might contribute to that death, I don't know. We certainly know that cellular compartments in the T cells contribute to death. So, organelles that, for example, contain granulysin and perforin. I don't know if that helps. If I've misunderstood, please let's have a quick chat afterwards.
Sure, sir.
So then, thank you so much for your attention, for giving me the privilege of also answering questions. Wish you a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the inspiring and insightful oration. I now request Dr. D. Balanaganandini, the Dean of Students of Tamil Nadu, Dr. MGR Medical University, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great honor and privilege for me to propose vote of thanks today on behalf of the Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University and Cancer Institute Adyar. First of all, I wish to express my gratitude to our most respected Honorable Vice Chancellor of this university for his inspiring presence and valuable words. I would like to express my sincere thanks to our esteemed speaker, Professor Hermann Ottensmeier, for enlightening us with thought-provoking oration on cancer vaccines. Very grateful for you, sir. I extend my thanks to Registrar Madam for her constant support in conduct of the program. Special thanks to Dr. Kalpana Balakrishnan for the introduction of the oration, and Dr. Vijayanand Pandurangan sir for introducing the orator. And my thanks to all the professors, faculties and students of various institutions for your active participation. A big thanks to the organizing team and each and everyone whose contribution made this program a memorable success. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. I request everyone to kindly rise for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय जय